Here is your complete, approximately equal to 1,800-word, emotional, cinematic story, all in one part, with both calls to action, plain paragraphs, no dialogue format, and a powerful opening hook. On the plane, the billionaire's baby wouldn't stop crying until a single dad did the unthinkable. The baby's cries pierced through the airplane cabin like a trembling siren, echoing with the kind of helplessness that turns every head and tightens every jaw. 30 minutes after takeoff, exhaustion already clung to the air like a heavy cloud. Passengers shifted impatiently. Flight attendants exchanged worried glances. A frazzled young billionaire mother, hair scattered, eyes red and fingers trembling, rocked her screaming baby with a desperation that broke the silence between sobs. No amount of bouncing, whispering, shushing, or soothing would settle her child. People muttered under their breath, some glaring with irritation while others tried to pretend they didn't notice. No one knew the mother's name, her wealth, or her power. In that moment, she was simply a terrified, overwhelmed parent on the verge of unraveling midair. And yet, the crying kept getting louder, until a single dad from the back of the plane stood up and did something no one expected. Something unbelievable, risky, and life-changing. If you believe in kindness, humanity, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. It truly supports stories like this. The journey had barely begun, but the crying already felt endless. The billionaire mother, Amelia, clutched her baby boy, Oliver, with a kind of fragile determination, trying to remain composed despite the weight of 100 eyes on her. She had faced boardrooms full of ruthless executives, negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, and risen from nothing to the top of her tech empire. But none of those battles compared to the helpless panic of not being able to calm her own child in a confined space 30,000 feet above the ground. Her breathing got shorter as Oliver's cries grew harsher, and although she tried to swallow her tears, they still gathered in her eyes. She whispered apologies to the passengers around her, even though her voice shook with the fear of losing control. Meanwhile, a few rows behind sat Ethan, a single dad traveling back home with his 7-year-old daughter, Mia. He was no billionaire, no executive, no celebrity. He was an ordinary man with gentle eyes and calloused hands from years of working 2 jobs. His daughter rested her head against the window, humming softly as she drew shapes on the foggy glass. She didn't seem bothered by the noise at all, but Ethan could see the rising tension in the cabin. He had been there once, many times actually. He had walked those same steps of panic when Mia was a baby, when strangers stared, when he was alone and afraid he wasn't enough. He remembered what it felt like to feel judged, powerless, desperate for help yet too ashamed to ask. So he watched the billionaire mother struggling, recognizing that tremble in her hands. A piece of him felt pulled toward her, not because he wanted to be a hero, but because he knew exactly what it felt like to be drowning in responsibility without a lifeline. He noticed the baby's flushed cheeks, the frantic kicks, the stiff arching of his back. Ethan recognized that particular cry. It wasn't hunger or fear, it was pain, something deeper, something familiar. The flight attendants whispered suggestions to the mother, offering warm towels, ice, distractions, soothing toys, even asking if she wanted to pace the aisle. Nothing helped. Oliver's wails tore at the air. Amelia's chest heaved with panic as tears spilled over, and she whispered apologies louder now, but her apologizing only seemed to frustrate the passengers more. She looked around helplessly, wishing she could disappear. Her designer clothes, expensive watch, and polished image suddenly seemed meaningless. Money couldn't fix this, wealth couldn't soothe a child's pain, and it surely couldn't protect her from the embarrassment swallowing her whole. Ethan finally exhaled deeply and whispered to Mia to stay seated. Then he stood, the only passenger willing to act, and walked down the aisle despite the annoyed faces around him. He approached Amelia slowly, gently, the way someone approaches a fragile bird trembling in their palms. He asked softly if she needed help, and although she hesitated, guilt and desperation made her nod. She handed him her screaming baby like someone surrendering the last piece of their breaking heart. And that's when Ethan did something that stunned the passengers, shocked the flight attendants, and even startled Amelia herself. He pressed Oliver's tiny body against his chest, placed one warm hand behind the baby's head, and began humming. Not a random tune, but a steady, deep rhythm that every parent knows children respond to instinctively. It was the kind of hum that carries comfort, the kind that tells a child everything is okay, the kind only a parent who has endured sleepless nights and tear-soaked shirts can master. And then he bounced gently, slow, precise, with a calm confidence that came from years of scraping by alone, without support or family to lean on. Within minutes, Oliver's screams quieted into hiccups. His little fists unclenched. His breathing softened. The baby who had shaken the airplane into chaos drifted peacefully into sleep against Ethan's heartbeat. The cabin went silent. Passengers stared with disbelief. A few whispered, a few sighed with relief. But none were more stunned than Amelia, whose shaky breath broke into emotional relief as she covered her mouth with trembling fingers. She had never seen anyone calm Oliver so fast, not even herself, not her nanny, not the pediatric specialist she'd hired. She felt something inside her loosen, a knot she had held on to for months without admitting how much she needed help. Ethan carefully shifted Oliver so the baby rested. Comfortably. He didn't make a show of it, didn't act like a savior, didn't even look around to see if people noticed. He simply did what he knew, what any parent with love stitched into their bones would do. He glanced at Amelia, offering a warm, reassuring smile that melted her sense of failure. She thanked him with trembling lips, but her gratitude came out in broken pieces, as though she had been holding her fear inside too long. Back in her seat, as Ethan sat beside her for the remainder of the flight, Amelia slowly opened up. It wasn't planned. It just happened, the way people sometimes confess to strangers on long journeys because it feels safer when lives won't intersect again. She told him about becoming a mother unexpectedly, after years of burying herself in work. She revealed how her husband had passed away months before Oliver was born, leaving her with an empire to run and a child to raise alone. She explained how she had been too ashamed to admit she was struggling, too afraid the world would judge her as weak, incompetent, or unfit, just because she couldn't perfectly balance motherhood and leadership. Ethan listened without judgment. He shared a bit of his own story, not in detail, just enough to let her know he understood. He had lost Mia's mother, too. He had worked 3 jobs at one point just to keep diapers on the table and milk in the fridge. He had cried in bathrooms, pacing with a screaming infant at 2 a.m. He had sat in hospital waiting rooms alone, holding tiny hands and praying for strength. He told her gently, with a kind of honesty that can only come from lived experience, that being overwhelmed didn't make her weak. It made her human. He reminded her that asking for help didn't mean she was failing. It meant she cared enough not to give up. Something in Amelia cracked, not in a breaking way, but in a softening one. Hearing someone else speak of loneliness, fear, and the hidden exhaustion of single parenthood made her feel seen. For the first time in months, she wasn't a billionaire or a public figure to him. She was just a mother trying to survive. Oliver slept peacefully the entire time, curled against the warmth of Ethan's chest, unaware that he had just bridged 2 lonely worlds. Amelia watched the way Ethan handled him, patiently, gently, like the baby was made of something precious. She felt a swelling admiration for a man who had no obligation to help, no ties to her, no reason to step into her chaos, and yet he did. When turbulence rattled the plane later, Oliver stirred, ready to cry again. Ethan calmly shifted him and resumed the soft rhythmic humming. Amelia felt tears sting her eyes, not from panic this time, but from gratitude so deep it felt like relief was washing through her pores. As the plane descended toward the runway hours later, Amelia realized something unexpected. She wasn't just grateful, she was changed. Something about Ethan's presence, his strength, humility, and quiet resilience, had touched her in ways she couldn't fully describe. He showed her that honesty didn't make her weak, that vulnerability wasn't something to hide, and that kindness still existed even in a world obsessed with power, status, and image. She felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years, a spark of connection she didn't know she still had the ability to feel. When the plane landed and passengers rose to leave, many looked at Ethan with a mixture of respect and awe. What he had done wasn't loud or grand or heroic in the traditional sense, but it was human, and sometimes humanity is the rarest form of courage. Before they parted, Amelia hesitated. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that captured the depth of what he had done for her, not just in silencing a cry, but in silencing the storm inside her heart. Yet words failed. So she simply pressed her business card into his hand, not out of formality or wealth, but because she wanted, truly wanted, to keep a connection with the man who had. Helped her breathe again. Ethan didn't promise anything. He didn't flirt or seek attention. He just nodded warmly, thanked her, and carried Mia's small hand as they walked away. But Amelia knew. This wasn't the end. Fate doesn't bring two broken parents together like that for no reason. Maybe their lives would cross again. Maybe they would heal parts of each other neither knew were wounded. Maybe this was the beginning of something powerful, something gentle, something destined. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support means everything. Before we end, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were on that plane?